So we will go to our second chapter, that is European colonialism. Let's begin with what is colonialism in the first way. It is, in simple words, it's a policy of a country seeking to extend or retain its authority over other people or territories, generally with the aim of economic dominance. And colonialism is also a part of imperialism. Now, the act of a developed nation occupying a land of a less developed distinct nation and establishing their rule on the occupied country is known as colonialism. This is our history meaning. In our history book, this is our meaning. Now, countries like England, France, Portugal, Spain, etc., gradually occupied the nations in Asia and Africa and established their colonies there. India was one of the colonies of England. One of the main characteristics of colonialism is to transport the raw material from the colonies to one's own country and use those colonies as a marketplace for selling their final products. Now, colonialism indeed gave rise to political and economic slavery, but it also causes psychological slavery. The racial attitude of the colonist countries and subsequent treatment given to the native people creates a sort of inferiority complex. When I say inferiority complex, it also comes with color. It also comes with telling them, that their trade is much better than theirs. Whatever they do is not so great, and what they do is much great. Then they began to feel they developed an apologetic outlook for their own culture and history. They began to feel unworthy. It was said that the sun never sets on the British Empire. It was a way to indicate the worldwide spread of British colonies. The British Empire encompassed the continents of Asia, Africa, America, and Australia. Now, during the 15th century, there was a commercial revolution, and as a result, the of the of the discoveries of new lands by various people, various voyagers, the traditional ways of commerce changed radically. European traders began to establish themselves firmly in Asia and Africa. The first point that we see is colonialism, the meaning and its nature. Now, Europeans reached all over the world with various intentions, such as the urge for adventures, to earn name, to discover unknown lands, to search for gold mines. Later, the trade and the commerce increased to a great extent, and the European countries began to compete with each other. Where there is business, there has to be competition. Wherever the Europeans went, they established their colonies. There was a competition to gain economic, social, and political supremacy among them. Now what led to the what were the factors that led to the growth of colonialism? They were extreme nationalism, feeling of racial superiority, industrialization, aggressive approach, etc. These were the factors. The Europeans went to America, Australia, New Zealand. They found the climate of these regions favorable for them, so they settled out there. However, it was not easy for them to adapt the climate of Asia. Despite the climate conditions favorable or unfavorable, Europeans displaced the indigenous people in their own lands. The British, the Dutch, Portuguese, and the French all devised several ways of demoralizing the indigenous people. The Europeans needed to capture newer marketplaces for selling their surplus goods, which were increasingly accumulating as a result of mass production caused by industrial revolution. Now, उनके country में बहुत सारा, there was lot of things being manufactured because there were so many machines and this and that. So all these goods started becoming more and more in their country. So they wanted it started increasingly it started accumulating a lot of things, a result of mass production in their country. So they decided of selling these goods outside now, more and more outside, just not with the little countries which they were doing trade with. They started doing it with more countries. So besides, they also needed additional source that would provide ample raw materials. In the later half of the 19th century, England had built a very flourishing trade as a result of the Industrial Revolution. The British, with the help of the naval forces, had established supremacy in Asian and African continents. Now, they have almost, I could say, they have settled in Asia and African continents. Now, earning surplus profits, investing surplus profits, increasing trade with the colonies for good investment, profit on the investment. This was an unending chain of theirs. France, Belgium, Italy, and Germany were the countries who looked like England strove to establish colonies. Now we go to the second point, that is the causes of the rise of colonialism. Now the first was the industrial consequences. Now colonialism was a result of industrial revolution. Okay? Production increased amazingly because of the new machines. We could say enormously. Okay? Enormously it increased because machines had come, because of the new machines. However, the rate of local consumption was much lesser compared to the surplus rate of production. Hence, the immediate need of the Europeans was to find new marketplaces for selling their products. It was also necessary that those marketplaces be dependable and easy to dominate. Okay? Now, when machines came, as I said in the first chapter, if you guys remember, as soon as machines started coming, what happened? The people in those factories started becoming less. Okay, why? Because machines are here, and this brought to a industrial consequence. So they had to they had to sell their goods, whatever they are manufacturing and all. So what they did is they saw countries which were dependable and easy to dominate, so that they could sell their products easily out there. The second cause we see is the requirements of raw materials. It is necessary to maintain low cost of production compared to competing nations in the market. The desire to create monopoly in the market and the need to procure raw materials at cheaper rates were two major factors which made it essential for European nations to establish clear supremacy. Now, for anything that you do, you require a raw material. For example, if you want to make a greeting card, you require the raw materials like chart paper and gum and pencils and crayons and etc. You need that kind of stuff. Now they wanted all cheaper. They wanted raw materials at cheaper rates, because if the raw materials are very expensive, then the production of goods the production of goods become a little bit expensive, and when things are when the raw materials are only expensive, then selling rate also will be at a higher rate, right? And it's a loss for the business people. And the third cause is investing surplus capital. The Industrial Revolution added to the wealth of the European capitalists who were already rich. They started searching for secure markets to invest their surplus funds. The markets in the less developed countries were quite secure from this point of view. Thus, the availability of the surplus capital facilitated the rise of colonialism. Now, as soon as business started coming, the business people started getting more rich. Okay, the Industrial Revolution added to the wealth of the European capitalists. These European capitalists were already rich. They are becoming more rich, and now to secure their money, okay, what they are doing is they are securing it. They are searching for markets, and then they're searching for markets to invest their surplus funds. To invest their funds, they're searching those markets. The fourth thing we see is the sources of minerals. The countries in Asia and Africa had rich sources of minerals like gold, diamonds, silver, and coal, etc. This attracted the European merchants to various regions of Asia and Africa. As we know, this India was called as the Sonali Chiriya, was the land of gold. So they got attracted to it and they came for it. Of geographic importance. European nations had realized that the geographic locations of some regions in Asia and Africa had advantages for trade. Asia, Africa, good soil, good money, good minerals. So it was great. Malta, Aden, Singapore, Andaman and Nicobar were such regions where the British established their hold. Availability of labor. The next point, European merchants needed large number of laborers at a very cheap rate. The colonies fulfilled this need. Later, it contributed to boom in the slave trade. When people came to know that jobs were being offered or something like that. Now, in their country, for example, in Europe, if it is like in Indian currency, if you say that you're being paid 5 rupees, but actually it has to be 10 rupees, it has to be 10 rupees, and they pay you 5, and the country is like for example, if the British are coming to India, okay, but the salary structure is 10 rupees. The British come to India and they need people to work in their colonies, but they need very cheap people, they need them at a very cheap rate, okay. So what they do is, they tell them that 5 rupees is the greater value. They should tell them that 5 rupees is a very greater value, and the people used to innocently work. So that's how they got people. And then slave trade also started. We must have heard in history before, like African slaves were taken to all these Britain colonies, and they used to make them work as their slaves, and so they used to get raped also, all these slaves. So it was that sad for the slaves. Now the next thing we see is the feeling of racial superiority. The European colonists claimed it to be their responsibility to civilize the people in Asia and Africa. This assumed role of the European resulted in conversion of many Asian and African people to Christianity. This also helped the growth of colonialism. Now, what happened is, these European peoples, they had a concept on mind. I remember my teacher telling me, in their last semester when we were studying, she was saying that the Europeans had a concept in their mind that God sent them from above to civilize the people. They had a thinking like that. इतना घटिया thinking था उनका. Okay, that's what I said here. That they feel that they had a responsibility to civilize the people in Asian and African continent. Now we see the next thing is the consequences. Now the people in Asia and Africa were economically exploited by the Europeans. The people in the colonies lost their independence. Their economic exploitation pushed them into poverty. At the same time, we may also note some constructive things that happened during the colonial period. Now, what happened during this thing? A new awareness emerged in the political, social, economic, and educational fields. So, when take an example of the British in India, when they came, educational institutions were developed. Education institutions were made, and also political, social, economic awareness started coming. People started knowing what these things were basically. Otherwise, we were living our lives as normal people. Political may ध्यान नहीं, सोशल में ध्यान नहीं, इकोनॉमिक में ज़्यादा ध्यान नहीं. It was just like, yeah, the money, the trade which happened in India in itself, like, it was a normal thing. Like the main person used to collect his money, whatever. It was a normal stuff going on. But when these guys came, there was awareness in political, social, economic, and educational fields. The common people became conscious of democratic systems and its inherent modern values like liberty, equality, and fraternity. Now they came here and they said like liberty, equality, and fraternity. Okay, but they didn't imply it. They did not imply it. India did not get a lot of liberties. India did not get a lot of freedom. Equality to Thai. They used to not consider them. The British used to never consider Indians or anybody for that matter, Africans. If you see the African and Asian continents, they never compared. They never saw that those people where they were trading were equal to them. They got introduced to principles like administration based on fundamental legal system, judicial system, availability of education to all. People became aware of the need to shoulder the responsibility of solving their problems, which eventually led to the independent movements in many colonies. That was the consequences we could see in our colonialism period. The European Now the next thing we see is European colonialism in America. While studying in history of the colonial period in America, it becomes apparent that the stronger European countries dominated the weaker countries by establishing their colonies there and pushed them into subjection. The European migrants seized the lands of original inhabitants in America and, if needed, massacred them. They destroyed the local kingdoms in Peru and Mexico. The original inhabitants were forced into slavery. As said, when they saw that those countries were weak enough, they could capture them. They used to capture those countries. For example, we are talking about America. They used to go, they used to capture them, and once they have done capturing them, they used to make them be as slaves, as their slaves, to mistreat them, and they used to, and if no one listened or no one agreed to whatever they said, they used to either kill them. Now, Portugal and Spain were on the forefront in the competition among the European nations to establish their colonies. Portugal brought Brazil in the American continent under their rule, and so did Spain by taking hold of Mexico. Now, what did Portugal did? Portugal and Spain, what they brought? They brought Brazil in the American continent under the rule, and so did. And now what Spain did? It took hold of Mexico. There they discovered gold mines. Spanish colonizers brought slaves from Africa to cultivate sugarcane and tobacco in American fields. Okay, अभी एक तो gold मिल गया, चलो gold मिल गया. Now when these people, they were seeing into when they were trading with Africa and Asian countries also, they thought, let's get slaves from Africa to do our work and to cultivate what? Sugarcane and tobacco. However, once the Spanish discovered the mines of gold and silver, they concentrated more on mining the precious metals than agriculture. Once you see that mining में ज़्यादा profit है, then they obviously people will go for that. So they went for mining and ज़्यादा भाव नहीं दिया agriculture को. Now they established control over the entire coastline of South America. The coastline region from Florida to California was held by Spanish. Here they engaged the Native Americans and the African slaves in farming. Okay. On the coastline of the south coastline, this in Florida and California, they started doing farming. Okay, farming and mining earned them enormous wealth. अभी farming, agriculture, vegetables, fruits, जो भी है, बेचो, you get good money. You sell gold, silver, whatever you get through mining, whatever precious materials you get, in mining, when you sell them, तो भी तुम्हारा इकोनॉमी बढ़ता है देश का, ठीक है. Now, Spain appointed governors to administer these regions. The King of Spain was the supreme authority. An organization called Council of the Indies was established to rule the colonies. Now, they established control over the entire coastline of South America. The coastline region from Florida to California was held by Spanish. Here they engaged the Native Americans and the African slaves in farming. Okay. On the coastline of the south coastline, in Florida and California, they started doing farming. Okay. Farming and mining earned them enormous wealth. अभी farming, agriculture, vegetables, fruits, जो भी है बेचो, you get good money. You sell gold, silver, whatever you get through mining, whatever precious materials you get in mining, when you sell them, तो भी तुम्हारा इकोनॉमी बढ़ता है देश का, ठीक है. Now, Spain appointed governors to administer these regions. The King of Spain was the supreme authority. An organization called Council of the Indies was established to rule the colonies. So, once they established this council was also in charge of the Spanish trade in this colonies. Now, इतना बड़ा area को संभालने, you need people, right? You need governors out there. So they had people for it. Now, essential raw materials were exported out to Spain, and finished goods used to be imported for sale in local markets of the colonies. Now, the trade of gold, silver acquired from these colonies earned huge profits for the king. Witnessing Spain's prosperity, England, Holland, and France also began to establish their colonies in America. ये सो भाई अमेरिका में इतना है, चलो हम भी उधर जाते हैं. During the reign of Elizabeth I, the Queen of England, she was a Queen of England, explorers were encouraged to undertake sea expeditions. Establishing colonies was a prime intention. Okay, the main intention was colonies established करना. So in 1496, John Abbott, he was granted permission to establish colonies on the American land. He established the British as the ruling authority in North America. Now, South America पे कौन है? Entire coastline of South is the Spanish people, okay? And the North is America. Now, in 1607, the British built Jamestown, Jamestown. It was a colony on the banks of the river James. Okay. Later, the same colony was renamed as Virginia. Now it is known as Virginia. Before it was named as Jamestown, as it was on the banks of the river James. Okay. You guys might have heard about Virginia, West Virginia. It's all in American, California, Florida, West Virginia, all those places. Afterwards, England established its colonies in coastal region of North America, stretching from New England to California. Now, with earning commercial benefits, welfare of the home country was added to the colonial intentions during the reign of the Queen Elizabeth. Now, to suit the colonial interest, England began to impose restrictions on the colonies. There were rules made. So the maritime law was a step in this direction. This law authorized only the British companies for sea transport. Now, everybody could not go. जिसको permission मिला है, only those people could go. The Stamp Act 1756 made it obligatory to purchase special stamps for important documents. British colonies in America like Virginia, Massachusetts put up resistance against the Stamp Act and on also other restrictions imposed on colonies. On 5th March 1770, some people were shot down by the British soldiers in Boston, a port city in Massachusetts. Okay, people were shot down by the British soldiers. Now, the British Parliament had granted monopoly to East India Company to import and sell tea to the colonies. Now, people in the colonies had started demanding removal of restrictions imposed on them and autonomy. There were so many restrictions on people, and people started getting irritated, and it started becoming difficult for the people. When the British government refused to yield to these demands, the American colonies declared to boycott on British goods. In 1773, an act of resistance, the local residents of Boston dumped the boxes containing tea and the sea belonging to the East Indian Company. So, you guys have heard, remember, early history, used to talk about Boston Tea Party when we were studying history back then in school. You must have heard about the Boston Tea Party. It was a very famous thing in 1773, because people were getting so irritated and they did not know what these guys are going to do, and these guys are not listening to them. So it's better that we also don't listen to them. And when a full ship of tea boxes came, they went on those ships and they started putting them in the water. They started throwing them in the water. Now what happened? A federation of the colonies known as the Continental Congress was established. In 1774, a meeting of the Congress was called. In this first meeting, known as the First Continental Congress, a strong opposition was expressed to import the British goods. It was also decided to boycott British goods. These events ultimately gave a momentum to the American independence movement against the European powers. You see how they did it? When 13 colonies in America came together and declared independence from Great Britain, they were so tired of these Britishers that these 13 colonies in America came together. On 4th July, in the meeting known as the Second Continental Congress, a document known as the Declaration of Independence was adopted. Now, this document was drafted by Thomas Jefferson. He is a very famous person back then. The crucial point of the document announced that the 13 American colonies were independent sovereign states. Now, these guys fought for their freedom. They really fought for their freedom and they got it. Okay, they held meetings and they saw things out there, and the British had to give them what they needed. Now, the key point of this document is a statement about 3 basic human rights, namely life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. It was stated that these 3 are the natural rights of all humans, which nobody can be deprived of. अभी ये बोल दिया उन लोगों ने. These 3 things are mentioned in those statements. Now, the conflict between the colonies and the British Army continued for some time. What time really this was there? Then we see is the British Army continued for some time, resulting into several battles after the colonies declared independence. So British चुप नहीं बैठने वाली, वो भी battles लड़ेगी. Obviously, they will also fight. They will थोड़ी ना give independence so easily to them. Finally, at Saratoga, the colonies got a decisive victory over the British Army. कैसे भी करके these colonies got independence. The victory proved to be a turning point for the colonies as the French agreed to support them in their conflict with the British. Now, there was even some countries, which had their colonialism in different parts of the world. Now, some people were not happy with the British. Okay, they were not happy with the British. So, whenever all these wars took place, they supported those people and not the British. Eventually, देखो, French हो गया. Now, Spain also joined the colonies in the struggle for independence. So, on 7th October 1780, George Washington defeated the British army. George Washington, very very famous person out there, you know, Washington DC सुना रहेगा. So he defended the British army. Then on 19th October, the British General Lord Cornwallis surrendered and America became independent. Now this fellow was a British fellow. Lord Cornwallis was a British guy. He surrendered. बोल दिया ठीक है चलो जाने दो. And then America became independent. That's how the American Revolt for Independence is known as the American Revolution. Now their revolution became their revolt. It was a war tantamount to Americans fighting one's own king to get back their independence. Americans proved to the world that the subjects have a right to fight the rulers who deny them their natural rights. It's said that the state without a king is a phenomenon which is a gift to the world from America. You see, they fought their own people out there. They fought their own people and their own stuff. And we as people, we as a state have a lot of powers. We can also bring down people from their post, but it does not happen in our country. हमारे देश में ऐसा कुछ नहीं होता है. But not getting into political side. Let's come back. Canada, a country adjacent to America, was acquired by the British by the Paris Treaty. Later, the British accorded the status of a federal state to Canada and established a bicameral parliament. They had also appointed a governor general in Canada. The Canada को भी ले लिया हम लोगों ने. Now, Australia and New Zealand. In the 18th century, the first colony of the prisoners deported from England was established in Europe. First, in 18th century, the first colony of the prisoners departed from England was established in Australia. Okay. Later in the 19th century, other regions in Australia were colonized. The British also established their colonies in the island of Tasmania and New Zealand. In the year 1900, the island of Tasmania was included and the Republic of Australia was created as an integral nation of the British Empire. Now, वापस एक bicameral parliament was established over here. Governor General was appointed in Australia by the British King as a viceregal representative. Only European migrants were allowed to enter Australia. Now, in 1907, New Zealand was accorded the status of an autonomous state within the British Empire. The European settlers in New Zealand adopted a democratic system of administration. And the pressure of public welfare, such as common right to vote, public railway, fire and accident insurance, pension for the old, compensation to workers who got injured or died on duty, etc., were implemented in New Zealand long before 1900. The only European immigrants were allowed to settle down in New Zealand. Only European people were allowed to settle out there. Next country we come to is Asia. To protect their colonies in India from other colonists, European nations, and to boost their trade in India and the neighboring regions were the main objectives of the British rule. Where they wanted their country, where they wanted that country to trade, they wanted it, and they did not allow any other country to get in there so easily. Now, Myanmar in India is India's neighboring country on its northeast boundary. Earlier it was known as Brahmadesh, that was Burma. Okay, Brahmadesh, that was Burma. Myanmar was known as Burma first. The British wanted to establish a control in Burma because it was rich in natural wealth and also potential markets. It was on the borders of India. That means it was rich, right? The whole Asian country was a very good place for business. A lot of things were available out in our land. Now, the royal dynasty of Myanmar had successfully consolidated the country under the rule. It also conquered Manipur in 1813. In 1822, they attacked Assam. Chalo, Myanmar aa gaya, then Manipur, and now Assam. The British were alerted by the Burmese attacks. Hence, Lord Amherst, the Governor General of India, declared war against Myanmar. The war continued for 2 years. It is known as the First Anglo-Burmest War. The British Navy conquered the port of Rangoon, that was Yangon, in this war. If you watch the movie Rangoon, थोड़ा थोड़ा आइडिया क्लैरिटी आएगी, मतलब मैं क्या बात कर रही हूँ, कौन थे बर्मा, what was it, if you guys have watched the movie. Otherwise, it's okay. It ended with a treaty between the British and the Burmese king. The Manipur was returned to the British. The coastal region, the forest, and the mines there came under the British rule. They said, Manipur you take, but the coastal regions, the forest, and the mines, that came under their rule. That the British collected a large sum as compensation against the military expenditure from Myanmar. They also appointed their residents in Inwa, also known as Awa, the capital of Myanmar, at that time. The Second Anglo-Burmest War started during Lord Dalhousie's tenure. 2 British individuals staying in Burma were asked to pay a fine by the Burmese administration. This minor incident was used as a pretext by Dalhousie to plan an attack on Myanmar. एक छोटी सी चिंगारी की देवी थी. Okay, they were waiting for something to happen and they started wars against them. Then Lord Dalhousie declared to have a war, and he sent his army to Myanmar with Commodore George Lambert as its head. Okay, with Commodore George Lambert as its head. He was the head of that army. Now, the Burmese Empire was defeated. The city of Rangoon, that was Yangon, Pegu, that was Bagu, and Promi was captured by the British. चलो अभी रंगून गया, जो मिला था वो भी गया. This region was merged in British Empire. With the victory, the British influence in the coastal region of Myanmar was firmly established. The British army fighting this war was comprised of Indian soldiers. Not only that, the expenditure of this war was also borne by the Indians. Okay, जो भी वॉर वहाँ पे हुआ था, थोड़ा बहुत इफेक्ट तो इंडिया में भी पड़ रहा था because it was in the borders, right? Now, the French had already created considerable influence in Vietnam, that is Indochina. Okay, Vietnam, Indochina. There was increasing contact between the Burmese king and the French. In addition, King Thibaw of Myanmar tried to strike a pact with Italy and Germany. These were the reasons enough for the British to feel, अला अभी चलो, ब्रिटिश को समझ में आ गया ना, if pact इटली और जर्मनी के साथ बन रहा है तो कुछ होगा. They got a pretext to declare war against King Thibaw when he leveled fine on the Bombay-Burma Trading Corporation, a British company. जब इसने फाइन मारा on the Bombay-Burma Trading Corporation, that was a British company, Lord Dufferin, the Governor General and the Viceroy of India, took this opportunity and sent army to attack Burma. जैसे ही किंग थीबो को पता चला कि भाई अभी चलो ब्रिटिश कुछ ना कुछ करेगी, let us also do something, so they started putting fines on the Burma Trading Corporation. Okay, now the Third Anglo-Burmest War was fought around 1885, and the British conquered the city of Mandala. King Thibaw surrendered, and the entire region of the North Myanmar became an integral part of the British Empire. Chalo, King Thibaw also surrendered, तो पूरा एरिया उनका हो गया. I mean, 1935, an act was passed to separate Myanmar from Indian territory. So Myanmar they decided to separate it only. So Myanmar was inspired by the Indian freedom struggle and gained independence in 1948. जैसे ही म्यांमार को पता चला कि 1947 में क्या हो गया, they also started. Before going to Africa, let's just finish Nepal, Sikkim, Bhutan, and Tibet, and then I'll ask you guys some questions or anything that you have doubts in. Okay. Now, Nepal was a small kingdom in the Himalaya region. अभी तक है छोटा सा. The British had sent their representatives to Nepal, but they did not receive any favorable response. It led to Anglo-Nepalese Nepalese War. The Gurkha army had merely 10 to 12,000 soldiers, while the British army was much larger, having more than 30,000 soldiers. The British attacked Nepal. The Nepalese army brought the British army to the point of desperation. It was defeated, obviously, where it was defeated at Makwanpur in 1896. Then British got the regions of Terai, Kumaon and Gharwal to the Nepalese. A British resident was appointed at Kathmandu. In 1923, the British accepted the sovereignty of Nepal. Nepal gaya, Myanmar gaya. Now we come to Sikkim. Now the main goal of these guys, of the British, was control over India's neighboring region. Once you get India's neighboring regions, the small kingdoms of the north border, it was good. Now, Sikkim was a small kingdom on the north border of India, which was surrounded by what? Bhutan, Bengal, Nepal, and Tibet. Now, in 1885, the king of Sikkim handed over the regions around Darjeeling to the British. मतलब नेपाल के सिक्किम के king ने, he said, चलो Darjeeling दे देते उनको. Then in return, the king was guaranteed certain amount as a privy purse. ठीक है, उसको बोला गया था भाई तू इतना देगा, तू अपने को ये लैंड देगा, then we'll give you so much money. Later, Lord Dalhousie sent army to Sikkim and took hold of some more regions of Sikkim. This threw open Sikkim markets to the British traders, and they authorized the British to collect octroi on the Indian-Tibet trade. In 1886, the Tibetans tried to capture the Sikkim. The British immediately took action against them then. In 1890, treaty between the British and China, it was agreed that Sikkim, a British protectorate, protectorate. In this way, the British could ensure the security of the tea gardens in Darjeeling. Sikkim was made a buffer zone, and the British took control of the internal administration and foreign policies of Sikkim. Okay, then a plebiscite was held in 1975, and the people of Sikkim voted for merging in the Indian Republic. Thus, Sikkim became a constituent state in Indian Federation. Now we see Bhutan as well. So now we see Bhutan. This is also a neighboring country of India, and it's also located in the northern border and to the east of Sikkim. Lord Warren Hastings, the first Governor General of India, had recognized the geographic and economic importance of Bhutan. Hence, he established friendly relationships with this country. It helped to open the trade route from Bengal to Tibet for the British. So see, they were very smart. किधर किससे दोस्ती कर रहे हैं, किस कहाँ पे दलने वाली है, or something like that, they used to do. In 1841, Ashley Eden took an aggressive stand against Bhutan. There was a war between Bhutan and British. The war was concluded with a treaty according to which the king of Bhutan surrendered the territories conquered by Bhutan to the British, and the king was granted an annual subsidy. Later, in another treaty in 1910, the British agreed not to interfere in the internal matters of Bhutan, and Bhutan agreed to be guided by the British in their external affairs. In 1949, a treaty was signed between India and Bhutan, according to which India assumed the position of an adversary to Bhutan in the matters of defense and external affairs. After the treaty in 19 with the British, उसके बाद दूसरा एक treaty आया था in 1949. Now this treaty was signed by India and Bhutan. First, England could interfere in their internal matters, but now India assumed the position of an adversary to Bhutan in the matters of defense and external affairs. Last thing we see is Tibet. Tibet was under the influence of Dalai Lama. The British wanted to have hold on Tibet for resisting Russian advances and to increase their own trade. During Lord Curzon's time, the British military had reached Lhasa, the capital city of Tibet, in 1907, as per the treaty between England and Russia. The political rule of China in Tibet was principally acknowledged. It gave a leeway to China to claim Tibet as an integral part of China. तो China ने claim कर दिया कि Tibet हमारा है. But that was the end to Asia. That was the end to India and its borders around. Now we have Africa. So European travelers reached Africa also. Now what they did in African continent? Now first of all, African continent, African territory, it had dense forest, widespread lakes, swamps and deserts was unfamiliar to them. In this territory, these things were unfamiliar to them. Now Leopold II, the King of Belgium, had Congo under his dominance. Now Congo is a place basically. He convened a geographical conference in Brussels in 1876. The European geographers and researchers had gathered in this assembly. It was decided that there to establish an institution called International Association for Exploration and Civilization of Central Africa for the purpose of dissemination of knowledge in Africa. Now this association was found, like they wanted this association to be come into use. So in 1884, a conference of European nations was organized in Berlin to explore the opportunities in Africa available to them. The true purpose of this conference was to discuss the possibilities of dividing African territories among them. So they had, in each and every meeting, they had their own motto. So in Berlin conference, the Belgian supremacy in Congo was acknowledged by all, and Congo was renamed as Congo Free State. Now it was also decided in this conference that if any of the European nations fails in utilizing their natural resources in colonies under their charge, then that nation should give it up to another European nation. Now George Taubman Goldie was a British citizen who founded the National African Company in England. Now, a charter was issued to him by the British government, permitting to conduct trading operations in Nigeria. Later, this company was acquired by the British government, and Nigeria became a colony governed by British government. Now, Bismarck, the Chancellor of Germany, established the first German colony in West Africa in 1883. It was named Togoland. Germany also established its colonies in Cameroon and Southwest Africa. Now, France established a supremacy in Senegal, Gambia, and in the region to the north of Congo. Now, as you see gradually, first the British came, okay? After the British, then then Germany comes, then France comes. Now let's see the next thing what it has. Later, France acquired the region of Dahomey from Portugal. Till 1994, France had established their control over the regions from Sahara Desert to Ivory Coast to the west and French Guiana. Till now, in this Congo state, there are people who speak French also. There are people who know French also out there. They speak French. You can say it's like kind of become a language to them now. When I say kind of language become to them is like in India we have they have adopted, so like in India we have so many languages like Bengali, Hindi, Marathi and all those type of things. Same way, when France came out there, not only the people learned that language, but they also started using it in their daily life, not only for business means but normal stuff also, like for conversation or anything like that. The Cape Colony and Natal in East Africa were held by England, while Mozambique was under the Spanish control. England, France, and Germany were interested in the regions in East Africa. So these three nations made a pact to protect each other's interests. Accordingly, the Sultan of Zanzibar was given Pemba Island and the coastal region of East Africa, while Madagascar was given to France. The coastal region of North of Africa to England and the south region to Germany. Now, as you can see, Sultan of Zanzibar was given Pemba, then Madagascar was given to France, and the coastal region of North America was given to England, and the south region was given to Germany. Now, in 1897, Germany took over the East African region from the German East Africa Company. England declared Zanzibar, Pemba Island, and Nyasaland, that was Malawi, as a protectorates, and it became to be known as the British Africa. Now, Germany took the East African region, okay, and England declared Zanzibar, Pemba Island, and Nyasaland, that was Malawi. Now, Morocco, Algeria, Tunis, Tripoli, that was Nubia, and Egypt were part of the north region of Africa. Now, in 1830, France had already established control over Algeria. Italy, France, and England wanted to occupy Tunis. France ने control already किया है Algeria को. Now, Italy, France, and England wanted to occupy Tunis. Now, in this competition, France was successful and got hold of Tunis from its Turkish Sultan. Thereafter, France took hold of Morocco as well. Italy conquered Tripoli, okay, and both island, and one more place also, Cyrenaica also, Tripoli and Cyrenaica, these two countries. Both England and France wanted to gain hold over Egypt. The British built railway from Alexandria to Cairo. Suez Canal that joined Mediterranean and Red Sea was built under the supervision of the French diplomat Ferdinand de Lesseps. Ferdinand, the French diplomat, किसका supervision में था? The canal that was Ferdinand de Lesseps. Lesseps. In the beginning, Egypt bore the expenditure for this project. However, later the expenditure for Suez Canal got so isolated that Egypt had to seek loans to meet it. To build a canal, it takes a lot of money, right? So, khatam ho gaye the almost paisa. So it became possible to repay even the interest on the loans. So each put up the shares of Suez Canal Company for sale. England purchased a number of shares and thus gained part of ownership of the company and the Suez Canal. Egypt became independent in 1922. The Sudan to the south of Egypt was in the vassal state. England, by the virtue of Egypt being deemed as being British protectorate, had also assumed the same role in Sudan. Sudan was important for England because of the Nile we have heard in Egypt बहुत अच्छी है, it and the lifetime of Egypt originates in Sudan. Now, England, without paying heed to local opposition, established its supremacy over Sudan. Now, to facilitate the moving of British army in Sudan, the British began to build a railway track from Uganda to Sudan. मतलब Uganda से Sudan तक, Uganda किधर, Sudan किधर. France accepted England's claim on Sudan and exchanged asked for some facilities in the western parts of Africa. Now, Cape Colony and Natal in the southern parts of Africa were under the British control. Orange Free State and Transvaal were under Dutch control. Gold mines were discovered in Johannesburg and it attracted European nations to South Africa. मतलब North हो गया, West हो गया, East हो गया. Now they come to South Africa. Resulted in England's decision to consolidate its colonies in the southern region and name it Union of South Africa. At about the same time, the Portuguese gained control over Angola. Some islands in Geneva coast, some part of Morocco came under Spain's rule. Thus, we learned about history of European colonies. And so this is the entire thing of the European colonies. Anything, any doubts, please record it and send it on the group. As soon as you guys hear this the video, please get back to me, as we have to complete a little bit question answering thing here and there, a little bit quiz here and there, and I would welcome all the doubts. Okay, as we are doing a video, so it becomes very difficult to stop the video and ask a lot of doubts, so that is the reason I'm asking you guys at the end of the video. Please be free to share all your doubts. Okay.